In this video, you will discover the 3 biblical laws of podcast growth, how to guarantee success or failure as a podcasting entrepreneur. So look, I'm really curious. For yourself, during your journey, are you familiar with the 3 unbreakable laws of podcast growth? You see, understanding these foundational principles could be the key to growing your podcast from stagnant to sensational. I like that word, sensational. Most podcasters think they can just create great content and the listeners will come. But as you know, they don't. It doesn't work like that. In a world where everyone, not just podcasters, are vying for attention, distinguishing your podcast demands quality content and adherence to certain foundational principles. And these are principles that so many podcasters can easily overlook. Why isn't your podcast growing as fast as you want? It's probably because you're unaware of these underlying rules that every successful podcaster lives by. But these are sneaky and so easy to miss. So look, my name is Anthony Winery. I'm the co-founder of GetMoreListeners.com, a company helping education-based podcasters, that's to us business owners, coaches, experts in their field, turn a slow growth show into a rapidly growing positive ROI show. Over the last 4 years, I've interviewed and coached 350 plus podcasters, and I'm also the co-host of Why Your Podcast Isn't Growing, which generates around $10,000 of attributed sales each and every month. I'm also the founder of the leading podcasting book brand under the pen name Daniel Larson, so these are our books. Anyways, this isn't about me, it's about you. Most podcasters totally ignore these laws and have to pay the price of slow growth, low engagement, and a cash-sucking podcast that feels impossible to monetize, all because you didn't know to follow these unbreakable growth laws. This is especially important for you if you're a serious entrepreneur with a podcast who has a burning desire to grow and monetize their podcast as soon as possible. If you feel like you're ready to take things to the next level, but you just don't have the time to figure it out on your own. Or you're an impact-driven podcaster who's creating valuable content, but just feel like you're missing a few pieces you need to grow. But you find yourself publishing your episodes week after week and not seeing the engagement and the numbers you'd hope for, seeing stagnant growth, slow and steady growth, spending all this time creating amazing content only for your growth and listener interaction to remain flat. And sometimes I've been questioning, look, is this even worth my time and effort? I'm spending so much time, so much money invested into the show for it not to really take me many places. I understand the frustration of having a podcast and podcasting for years and just not seeing the growth you expect, right? I think that's the worst thing when you're really giving something your all and you know you're making good content, have a powerful message, and you get good feedback, but you're not quite taken off. I have to say, it's not your fault, to be honest with you. Most traditional podcasting advice are often outdated and not tailored to today's world. So many advice you see online now are complete trash. And that's exactly why I wanted to arm you with the proven strategies to cut through the noise straight away. So think of these strategies as the 3 commandments or the 3 commandments that are timeless, tested, and tailored to help you. To be honest, again, these are principles to kind of live by and just laws you should not break. These aren't necessarily going to be crazy strategies. As a mindset and an approach you have to take. So cool, and I get the point. Cool, yada, yada, yada. But what the hell are these laws? So these are the 3 biblical laws of podcast growth. Law number 1, inputs equals outputs. Your podcast quality and the engagement level are a direct reflection of the effort and innovation you put in. To grow a highly engaged audience, you must become a highly attentive host. Most podcasters aren't attentive. Most podcasters don't prioritize their podcast. And most podcasters fail to grow because the entrepreneur doesn't prioritize it. And when the podcast isn't a top priority, not growing doesn't feel painful enough to trigger a change in their behavior. So your inputs don't change and your outputs stay the same. If you want to grow your podcast, you have to make it a priority because again, your inputs equals your outputs. I'm going to explain deeply how this is ingrained. And I know you might be thinking to yourself, and I am dedicated. I am all in. I am giving it my all. My inputs are incredible. I don't doubt that. And I'm sure the podcast is a priority for you. If not, you wouldn't be listening to this. But I think it depends on what your standards are. Like what is your standards? Like, are you constantly pushing the limits? Because the truth is, once you start feeling the pain of stagnation and really feeling it because it's a priority, you change your inputs to match your desired outcome. You can't get 6-pack abs without consistently going to the gym, doing crunches, doing leg raises, and working on your core exercises. Your inputs has to match the outcome you want. And the same goes for your podcast. If you want to grow fast, get big, and turn a slow growth show into a rapidly growing positive ROI asset for your business, for yourself, your inputs have to match that. If you want to build a highly engaged audience like Alex Hormozy or Stephen Butler, your inputs have to match that. If you want your podcast to be a profitable venture that prints cash or turns listeners into clients, your inputs have to match that. If you want to become the Joe Rogan of your industry and leave a significant impact, your inputs have to match that. Here's what it looks like when your inputs don't match that. Hoping you'll suddenly get more time to invest and grow your show instead of making the time to invest and grow your show. not reviewing your episode titles or thinking, how can I improve them? Not investing in your education around podcast marketing and getting a coach or listening to a podcast or watching a video. Again, you're doing this piece because you're here watching this, but not doing that consistently and not investing in yourself, not reviewing your retention time of your episode, not even being aware that you should be reviewing the retention time, the engagement rate, the completion rate of your episodes. Getting lazy with your guest selection because yes, it's easy for you to get guests. Yes, you have people emailing you and reaching out because they want to guest on your show, but you not having a high enough standards to reject people consistently and only find the right people for your audience. Ignoring your listeners' feedback and not making change straight away. But again, these are all vital things that play a role in podcast marketing. This is the mindset. Like we on our podcast, While Your Podcast Isn't Growing, we invite podcasters getting 10,000 plus monthly downloads. We've had people who are getting 1.5 million downloads per month. They come onto their show and how they operate, how they think about their shows, how they think about growing an audience. It's totally different to the average podcast that is struggling to grow. And it's very clear to see, you quickly understand the mindset shift is really when you're now getting 10,000 monthly downloads or the 100,000 monthly downloads or 1.5 million. That didn't happen by magic. It happened by their inputs being so focused on all the elements of their show, constantly improving it by 1% and making those changes fast, not sitting on it, not having an idea, thinking, oh, that sounds good, not watching a YouTube video or listening to a podcast and thinking that sounds good and not making that change instantly. They act fast and they improve all these different elements of their show to get them into that 1%. So don't ignore these things. They might seem trivial, but that makes such a huge difference. Again, these are the principles to really abide by. It's really that simple. Law number 2, never miss an upload. Consistency in podcasting is key. Set and stick with your publishing schedule to build trust and habit with your audience. If you don't have a consistent schedule, most of you probably will do. When you don't have that, how will your audience fit into their routine? You need to plan ahead and have backup episodes to avoid any disruption. You should never, I don't care. You should never, ever miss an upload. I don't care if it's your honeymoon, if it's your child's prom, or even if you're stuck in the wilderness all alone. Never miss an upload. If you want to grow fast, get big, and monetize as soon as possible, never miss an upload. Now, look, all jokes aside, like I say all jokes aside, I'm not really joking, like genuinely being serious, like just don't miss an upload and be relentless. Stay consistent no matter what. You're only going to kill momentum and the compound effect you've built up. Imagine you've been podcasting for like 2 years and then you start to take like a 3-week break. For what? Your listeners don't really care. They just think, okay, well, you're not here. Why aren't you here? Where's the content? And guess what? It's competitive. Everyone else is vying for their attention and their attention gets taken away. And now you've lost momentum and you have to start building that momentum back up again. And now again, you've lost a compound effect that comes from you doing something consistently over a prolonged period of time. So here are simple strategies for keeping consistent. Number 1, backup episodes. Number 2, record 1 or 2 episodes that are evergreen and can be published in case of an emergency. Number 3, batch record episodes. Number 4, record multiple episodes at once, which is basically batch recording episodes, right? But the point is, just have backup episodes. Have content you can constantly use and repurpose. So don't cut, you can always stay ahead, so don't cut things short. This will save you time and give you the buffer to work with some personal or professional things that can happen. Look, life happens, I get it. Things get busy, things get a bit chaotic. You've got a business, you've got the kids running about. Things can get a bit crazy. But again, you should never, ever, under any circumstance, miss an upload. Because you can republish old episodes. You know, I had a client recently where she was going away on a holiday. She thought, you know what, I'm going to go on holiday. I'm going to miss a couple of weeks. And honestly, I nearly went crazy. I didn't go completely crazy, but I nearly went crazy. I was like, come on, look, our growth is moving in the right direction. Why on earth will we stop this momentum? It doesn't make any sense. You've done all this hard work to carry this massive boulder up this gigantic hill. And just before you get right to the top, you just let it go and decide to roll it down and take 5 steps back. No, so don't miss an upload. And then the final thing, and this one's so important, you have to find positive feedback loops. So what does that even mean? Positive feedback loops. It basically means implementing strategies that allow you as the podcaster, as an entrepreneur, to measure what works and refine your approach accordingly. So in the context of podcasting, a feedback loop is a systematic approach of growing your podcast based on direct and indirect responses from your listeners and trackable metrics. It involves you taking a specific action, measuring its impact, learning from the outcome, and then using that information to make a more informed decision for future actions. It's a data-driven approach. You're not just guessing, hoping to grow your podcast. Again, you have a process in place where you're deciding which actions to prioritize. Most podcasters never find this. They never find a positive feedback loop where they can take an action repeatedly and consistently grow their show. When you're able to pinpoint an action that drives higher growth and engagement for your podcast, that's when you found what we call a positive feedback loop. If the action doesn't do anything, is negative basically because you're not gaining anything, you can then repeat this action over and over and over again, and the show will continue to grow. So imagine if you've just been podcasting all this time and you finally find a specific action you can take every single day to help you grow your podcast. How amazing would that be? How much relief would you have knowing you actually have a bit more control and predictability for the growth of your show? So an example of a feedback loop could be, for example, podcast guesting. So you have a hypothesis. I want to see if guesting on other people's podcasts is going to help me. So the action, you decide to guest on various podcasts that have a similar target audience to yours. You schedule guest appearances on 5 different podcasts over the course of a month. You might have heard of this. You might have heard us talk about it. You might have heard it from someone else about how guesting on other people's podcasts is a great way to grow your show. The measurement, after each episode goes live, you track and see if you've had an increase in your downloads that week. Step 3, evaluation. At the end of the month, you review your metrics that you've collected and make a note of which podcast appearances resulted in the most significant increase during that day. You then identify any common factors among them. So podcast size, audience engagement, or relevancy of the topics you covered on the show. Step 4, adjustment. Based on your own analysis, you make specific data-driven decisions. You identify what the most effective types of shows were and hosts for your future guest appearances. The goal should be to seek out similar opportunities. So you've gone through this process, you've pitched a bunch of different shows, you can measure and see what's working and what's not by looking at your analytics and seeing, do I get an average increase in my downloads per day over, in the days that the episodes went live? You're now evaluating to see what's worked and what's not. And you then want to decide which opportunities you should seek out. So if certain appearances didn't result in an increase in listenership, consider what might have went wrong. So again, this is just critical thinking. Was the audience not a fit? What topics did you discuss? Or perhaps was the chemistry of the host just way off? Then you want to refine your approach to guesting. Perhaps you change how you introduce your podcast during an appearance, or you offer them a specific episode of your podcast you believe the listeners will enjoy. Following this process means you can get very good very fast. And I think I want to kind of take a moment to kind of share this little quick story. Like I had on a Monday episodes on our podcast, Why Podcast Isn't Growing, we invite listeners onto our show, we give them podcast audit. And this lady was like, she came on, she came on a podcast. She's been getting around 300 downloads per month, and she was struggling to grow for a little while now. She's been podcasting for around 2 years, and we're just talking to her saying, "Hey, so why do you think the podcast isn't growing?" She's like, "Oh, I'm not too sure. It could be this, it could be that." And then we're just like, "Okay, cool, got it." But I guess what things have you done? Has anything worked? And she's like, "Oh, I was posting on social media, and that was okay, but nothing much has changed. I've been getting high-profile guests on, nothing much with that, then that's not too bad." But then I recently guested on the podcast, and that actually gave me like a nice little boost. I saw my numbers actually increase slightly, and I'm like, okay. And then we said to her, "Well, have you tested that anymore? Have you done anything more with that? You guessed on the podcast. What do you think the podcast grew after you guessed on this lady's show? Was it the size of the podcast? What was it?" And she was like, "Oh, well, I spoke about this topic that was trending at the time, and then when the podcast episode was released, I also had content that was speaking about that specific topic. So I'm guessing some of their audience checked out my podcasts, found a similar topic with more depth, and listened to my show." And then we're like, "Okay, cool." And she goes, "Yeah, but other than that, nothing's really working. I didn't really know what it is. I didn't really know what I should do." And me and my business partner, Targ, looked at each other like, "Dude, what the hell?" And we're like, "Lady," I wouldn't say lady. Let's call her Amy. We're like, "Amy, what are you talking about? We found something that's working, right? How often do you find things that actually work where you take an action in podcasting as a growth strategy and it actually works?" And she goes, "It's pretty damn rare. I've been doing this for 2 years. I've tried a bunch of different things and nothing seems to work." And then me and my business partner looked at each other like, "Well, okay, then you found something that has worked now. Have you tested this anymore?" She was like, "No." And I was like, "When was the last time you went to this podcast?" She was like, 90 days ago. So 3 months ago, you saw that you guessing on this podcast worked, and you knew that you covering topical topics on your podcast episode helped you retain more of those listeners, but you haven't tested it again. You haven't done it again. She goes, "No, I haven't." I was like, "Oh, come on. That's exactly what you should do." And I think the light bulb hit for her because she kind of just thought it happened by accident, rather than just asking herself, okay, my podcast has grown significantly more. My podcast this month, downloads numbers has increased significantly more than last month. What were my inputs? Again, it goes back to inputs and outputs. What were my inputs? What did I do that was different from this month versus last month? Okay, I was guesting on these types of podcasts. Amazing. How can I test to see if I can consistently get this as a result? Oh, I should just guest on more podcasts. So you right now, you might have a specific action that you know you can take and your listenership will grow. Just keep taking that action. Double down, triple down, 10 extra efforts in that area. When you find a piece of success and you've taken an action and the show grows, that is your positive feedback loop. And oftentimes when you're not thinking like this, when you don't think the realized inputs equals outputs, your podcast doesn't grow for no reason. It grows for a reason. When you can figure out why it's growing, you can do more of that thing. And it works, you have a positive feedback loop. That is what you need to find, a positive feedback loop. So following this process allows you to consistently and reliably grow your show. This removes the guesswork around attracting the right listeners for your podcast. Because without finding a positive feedback loop with your podcast, you're just guessing and hoping the show will take off. So to recap, the 3 biblical laws of podcast growth are: number 1, inputs equals outputs. Number 2, never miss an upload. I didn't give a crap. Just never miss an upload. Number 3, find positive feedback loops. Create a hypothesis and a strategy you want to test for 90 days. Take consistent action towards that. Measure the results. Use the data to then help you make better informed decisions about which actions, when it comes to growing your podcast, you should prioritize. When you can do these things and focus on your inputs, making it very clear, making like really amazing fuel. When you never miss an upload and you build it in the same momentum, and when you find positive feedback loops, actions you can take repeatedly to grow your show, the podcast grows so much faster. The outcome, compounding growth month after month, higher engagement, and finding strategies that actually work. So yes, it's seriously important for you to follow these laws if you want to finally break free from slow and steady growth, if you want to build a highly engaged community, if you want to turn your podcast into a positive ROI show. That's it for now. And look, my name is Anne from Nera. You've been fantastic. I genuinely hope this provided you some insights. It's honestly more so the mindset shift that I've seen our successful clients adopt. And podcasts I've interviewed over the past who were doing like stupid numbers, like literally 1.5 million downloads a month. How they think, I start to notice how they think is very different to podcasts who are struggling to grow. You might not know these things. You know, these are some things that are just so easy to miss. For example, like I know the inputs and output one, that's so true. You have to show up. You have to do your research. You have to take things like, you have to be exceptional if you want to get exceptional results. And then when it comes to a positive feedback loop, like most podcasters don't have that. It's just guesswork. And if that's you right now, I'd really encourage you to start being a bit more intentional with the actions you take within your podcast. Being a bit more intentional, mindful, and asking yourself, well, why is this strategy working? Why isn't the podcast growing? Getting to the root cause of why things aren't working, fixing that. Because when you do that, things become so much easier, so much more enjoyable. You have so much fun, and you get to make a lot more impact and a ton more money. So look, that's it for now. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.